How many bad matchups does Aurora truly have? And what do we need to do to actually beat them? Today we're going to answer those questions while ranking them in a tier list. For anyone who's new to the channel, on the screen I'm showing you my credentials as a player. And of course, before we start, we need to cover the rules for the tier list. I will mainly be talking about the laning phase where the 1v1 is most prominent, since that's what matters the most. If something outside of lane is important, I'll make sure to mention it. There will be 5 tiers ranging from easy to almost unplayable. Champions put more towards the left in a bracket that are more difficult to deal with. The reason the hardest tier is named almost unplayable is very simple. There is no matchup in the game that I think is truly unmanageable on mid lane. You might be forced to go behind in CS or lose priority at crucial timers, but there's no way for the enemy to completely remove you from the game. This is a complete contrast to top lane, where there are literal matchups in which you can play close to perfect and you'll still be made obsolete. On mid lane, that doesn't exist. You can overcome most inconveniences with good planning, wave management, and execution, especially because priority and playing for situations on the map matters way more and happen around you more often. And also, mid lane is shorter, which means perma-freezing is not a thing. I do want to clarify something important here regarding lower divisions. The truth is, while bad matchups exist no matter what rank you play in, you should look to destroy your opponent to the best of your abilities no matter how difficult it is, since the opposing laner will be making a lot of mistakes. So if I end up putting a matchup in a high tier, does not mean you can't win it consistently. I'm currently climbing through Mastery Elo myself, and the mistakes most of my opponents make are quite exploitable. If they're happening here, they're certainly happening in your own games. Use them in your advantage. Lastly, I will make sure to give advice for every matchup. On this note, I also released the Aurora cheat sheet where I've written a really in-depth explanation on how to deal with all Aurora matchups you can think of on top lane and mid lane. It includes a game plan, pros and cons, what to level up, and my rune options. There you can also find notes on all important Aurora ability interactions, like for instance how you can cancel Akshan ult with your portals, or negate Talia's W ability with your E pushback. I'll be updating it with more video examples and anything else that I deem important in the future. It's available on my Patreon, and to keep it as accessible as possible, you can have it by subscribing to at least the lowest tier. We will go in alphabetical order and there will be extra information on screen. First on the menu is Ahri, and this is a controversial matchup because I've seen some people say it's a very hard one, but others say that the matchup is actually easy. The truth is, it's very close to being a 50-50 one, but not exactly. See, the thing is, Ahri's W movement speed makes her very hard to hit, so the Aurora needs to anticipate it and be very patient when throwing her Qs. Also, you need to hide behind minions when taking trades so you don't get hit by random charms, but also walking towards her in zigzag to ensure she doesn't hit both parts of the Ahri Q. And Aurora is actually pretty good at dealing with Ahri's skit in general. She has a small hitbox, and the weirding is a very good way to ensure free poke onto her. A good Ahri will make it somewhat difficult to find kills, but at the end of the day, Aurora matches her range and overall just has good ways to deal with her. For that reason, I'll be putting her in high into the Aurora favorite tier, being very close to a pure 50-50 one. Of course, later into the game, both can one-shot each other, but the one with the better understanding and itemization generally wins. Akali is a fairly straightforward matchup. Level 1 and 2 you're stronger, so fish for her lead. The key is to get as much damage onto her as possible while making the wave bounce back to you. After level 3, be careful for Owen type of trades, since she's at her full power. She does have big cooldowns, so baiting her abilities is a good habit to build up. Look to make the wave be more towards your side whenever possible, since the key to a stable lane is poking her HP down to a percentage where you win all wins. Just keep in mind her short trading is also pretty good, so you need to get acquainted with her Q and E ranges to dodge them consistently. After level 6, respect her even more and again avoid straight up all-ins. Don't step up for Qs if you think she has the intention of ulting you. A common theme amongst facing assassins will be to max range E poke them enough before you can actually step up for a Q. This might surprise you, but she will be going below Ahri in the Aurora favorite tier. The reason is her early laning is quite weak if you know how to abuse it, and later when she's stronger she's pretty telegraphed and Aurora can work around it. If you end up dying, it's purely because you messed up either the wave or disrespected her all-in potential. Side note, outside of lane, this matchup slowly becomes unplayable in the 1v1. That's because Aurora specializes in teamfights, whereas Akali is made to assassinate people easily if she gets a good angle on them. Akshan, you need to respect the first level by letting the wave push towards you, since he might start with E and all-in you. Be extra careful when he's about to hit level 2, since he still has a window to pull the trigger. Keep a close eye on him at all times and anticipate if he will go for an all-in, since you need to be ready to trade damage back. I generally advise holding your abilities for after he lands, but sometimes throwing your abilities while he's flying due to you wanting to build more space before he gets next to you is a good idea. After level 3, the lane becomes much easier since putting at least one extra point into E makes the whole lane much more playable due to you playing primarily for max range poke, and this is even if you choose the electrocute page. That said, my recommendation is to go Comet, since Akshan can't really play into it as long as you keep distance and know when to disengage. Both rune pages have pros and cons, so it's up to you. Accuracy, dodging his Q, playing around his shield, and anticipating when he'll ult you are important things to also keep in mind. Akshan can be a tricky one. I think execution and game plan completely sway it one way or the other, so it's in my opinion the definition of a skill matchup. Next up is Anivia, and this is a rough matchup. The thing is, she has way too much HP due to her passive and the items she builds, so finding lethal on her only happens if Anivia isn't proficient on her champion, or if you somehow keep on skill checking her and she never passes the test. The good thing is that she can't really force plays onto you either. It's basically a complete neutralization, since if you can't find anything until level 6, she'll just perma wave clear and have priority on you, which honestly is not very ideal for Aurora of course. My general advice is to just avoid interacting with her outside of occasional E's and only going in at her if you have information on the enemy jungler, whilst knowing you have enough juice to finish her off, since there's too much room for error. Her Q perfectly counters Aurora in most situations, and her short trading has immense damage output even as early as level 3 due to electrocute. The key here is to accept that you have almost no timers to do anything in the lane and play to carry the game through the mid game. I'll put her high in the enemy favorite tier since, as I said, she can't really force you to bleed resources, and if she oversteps, you might even be able to find openings to punish her back. She's just like a brick wall in front of you to just sit around and be a nuisance. Another difficult to deal with matchup, Annie. Her stun is very good at locking you down due to her Q being click on a target ability and ult having roughly the same range as you. The key here is to try and get a lead pre-level 6. Try to use your abilities when she's going for last hits with Q since it has a small cooldown in between usages, and she's also static when doing so. Annie will often try to dodge abilities using her E since it gives her a burst of movement speed. Try to anticipate it and predict her movement, or if possible hold her abilities for after it wears off. A very important tip is to keep eyes on her stacks. If she ever has 0 or 1, it's a good time to trade since the thing is, unless she actually stuns you, she doesn't really win exchanges pre-level 6. After level 6 though, the matchup becomes quite a bit harder since her ult is lower CD and she'll look to constantly drop it on you when you're in her range. This is worth for her because even if she doesn't kill you, she puts you at low enough where you can't play the game. At that point, try not to take any trades when she has her stacks up and only step up for max range E's. Her weak spot is her W is actually quite low range. The goal is to keep distance so she's forced to walk into you deeper if she wants to use it, in which case you can use this in your favor to trade damage back. This matchup is very similar to Anivia, but it's annoying for different reasons. There's more kill opportunities and overall not an NPC farm lane, so Annie will go below her. Aurelion Sol is a fairly easy to deal with champion. You need to respect him level 1 by playing around his Q range by only going in to throw abilities and not overstaying for auto attacks, but also level 2 be careful of his insane all-in. Even if he doesn't kill you, if he gets a good angle with W and you're not aware of his prominent all-in potential, you get put to low HP, and that's not what you want in this lane. After level 3, the game becomes impossible for Aurelion Sol, goal is to keep poking him down with E and put him as behind as possible. A key thing to remember is he has very good wave clear, so make it hard for him to land abilities on the wave by staying away from it as much as possible when going for trades. You need to find a good middle ground between poking him and making the wave push towards you, since if you damage him but he's not forced to stay in lane to fix the wave, he'll just end up recalling and that's a win for him, since he slowly but surely outscales as a champion. Also, keep an eye on his mana pool, since he has issues with it and you can use that in your favor. This matchup is very straightforward and is going in the easy category. Azir is basically the same matchup with slightly different caveats. The key is to make him drop soldiers and not giving him more than one auto attack worth of damage on you whenever possible. So anticipate their usage when you step up to fight him and instantly reposition in a way where he can get good value out of them. This of course applies for the whole laning phase, but level 1 it's extremely effective since he doesn't have access to Q for the reposition. Azir is very static as a champion since he needs to land auto attacks when trading and CSing. Your goal is to use that in your favor to land free abilities. Your E ability also completely contras him as it acts as self-poke together with Scorch and sudden impact. Similar to Aurelion Sol, the more you put him behind early on, the better the whole game will be. That said, even though Azir is a mid to late game champion, he doesn't necessarily outscale Aurora, because if you've done a good job to have an okayish lead, he's still fairly static, and unless he has Banshee's Veil, if your abilities land on him, he'll just get evaporated. But a good Azir could wreak havoc on side lane, so your job is to end the game as soon as possible against scaling champions nonetheless. He's going below Aurelion Sol in the easy tier. I've only faced mid-brand once, and my experience with the matchup is that it's not too hard but not too easy either. It's all about getting the hang of dodging and anticipating his abilities. If you eat too many Ws in a row, you struggle to even exist in the lane, but if you dodge it and then look for a punish on him, it will be a smooth breeze. His E and ult are very good into Aurora since they're point and click, but his Q, which is his bread and butter ability to get stuff done, is a skill shot, meaning that if you also get good at dodging it, you just have an overall easy time. Use your ult portals to make it hard for him to hit abilities and all-ins, and go for WEs from time to time to start poking down his HP. Also, at least one extra point in E goes a long way in this lane. Brand will go into the skill matchup category. Cassiopeia is an interesting matchup. Level 1, be careful what ability she has. Anticipate her starting Q and start dodging right away as you walk into the lane. If you see her use E, you're basically off the hook and can look to start spamming E's on her from level 1. You can even look for auto attack plus E for maximum damage output. Until she shows her ability, predict that she did start Q and keep dodging until she eventually uses it. If you ever get hit by it, look to not give her any E's. Your own E is perfect to disengage at any time she looks to fight you. Your goal in this lane is to bait out her Q and dodge it, and when that happens, you have roughly a 3-second window to look for a punish. It's a constant cat and mouse game between each other, and the one with the better accuracy wins. She can't ever really kill you unless you overstep and get hit by too many Qs or forget about her W. Of course, be careful of flash ults later on into the game. Despite me losing this matchup to very good Cassio players, I cannot put it higher than Aurora favored, because the truth is, if I lose it, it's because I played bad, not because the matchup is difficult. Cassio best case scenario can make it playable for her if she has great movement and accuracy, but even then it's on you to one-up her and play better. Of course, the longer the game goes, the bigger the monster Cassiopeia becomes, so try to end it as soon as possible. Depending on the meta, you might end up encountering Corki on mid lane. The thing is though that Aurora completely counters him here on mid lane because she outranges him, and in combination with the short lane, it makes everything very smooth. His only real way to fight back is by looking for all wins and occasionally catching you off guard with Qs, but if you keep both of these things in mind when going for trades, you have no issues coming out on top. That said, the moment he gets an item and a few levels, he does become a DPS machine, but even later on into the game, Aurora's longer range and burst comes quite in handy. I've put him in high easy, though if you face him and think he's more of a low Aurora favorite tier, I can understand that. Qiyana is a very notorious matchup, and I've heard a lot of Aurora players complain about it. The truth is that it's completely valid. This matchup is one of the worst. The key is to make it somewhat playable by getting good at dodging her Qs and switching up how you do so throughout the lane. Bait in and out, drop a minion here and there if you have to, but do not give her any good engages. Her Q always comes out from the right side, so use that in your favor when dodging. Her biggest weakness is her low mana bar. Try to wear her off and never eat free damage. It's important that if she ever finds a trade on you by going in with E, you also deal damage back to her. Ideally, you should be ready to disengage before she hits you with too many bubbles from her W ability. Positioning in a way where you get as much value as possible from pullbacks and keeping the wave on your side are both vital to overcoming this difficult matchup. Also, early levels you're stronger than her, so try to get a lead pre-first back. Qiyana will be the first champion going into the almost unplayable tier. Now the thing is, her kit is manageable for the most part, but after a certain point, let's say level 9ish, if you don't have a sizable lead, she can just press E on you without the need to pre-land a Q, and that's it. She will just out-trade you, trade ults with you, and her ult is a lower cooldown, so that benefits her, or just straight up lead to you. It's a very oppressive matchup and you can overcome it, but it requires you to be on your A game. When it comes to Ekko, you meet two types of players. They're aggressive ones that look to start E level 1 and look to perma-fight you every time it's up via Hail of Blades, and the alternative one that will look to mainly farm and play for scaling. These could have Hail Blades but generally go electrocute. You can also kinda tell what type of Ekko they are by their secondary summoner spell. If you think they'll play aggressive early on, let the wave push into you. It's very important you never let Ekko E on you without having your own E up, since the way it interacts with the champion is completely negates his engage, and if you master it, you win any trade in which he goes in at you. You need to use it just as you're about to get hit by his E auto attack, and a little bit too slow and he'll proc his passive, so make sure that doesn't happen. The only downside is your E has double the cooldown of his, so you have more downtime on when you can step up. Anticipate his W usage from Fog of War, and generally it's not too rough of a champion to face. I'll put him in low opponent favorite since at the end of the day it's easier to execute Ekko's side, and if he does skill check you correctly, the matchup becomes quite more difficult. But if you're attentive and have a game plan going into the lane, you will be completely fine. Ezreal is a matchup you might end up facing occasionally, but it's quite rare. I even was debating whether I should put him here since he's not really a mid laner. Always use minions to block his Qs and look to primarily play off of E-poke. He does extend trades very nicely via his passive, so only go for extended trades if you can either stop the altercation if things go bad, or if you know you win it. Levels benefit you, so try to not go for anything risky pre-level 3. If everything goes smooth early lane, after level 6 with a few E's on him, you'll just be able to farm him. He will go into high easy tier. He's very similar to Corki, but he will go below him since he's easier to play around. One of, if not the most notorious Aurora matchup, Fizz. I've heard numerous amounts of complaints about how do I deal with Fizz. Level 1, you're stronger than him. Even if he has Ignite and gets to hit you first, you will still win the fight due to your passive. Just make sure your Q lands on him, so hold it on for after he uses E. When the minions arrive, hit one minion at least twice so it makes it so their HP is uneven. This way he can't just E and take all of them, but is forced to actually step up and auto attack. This matchup is all about having a keen eye on when he'll look to use E to block damage or turn CSing into a trade into you. You should have no issues bullying him pre-level 3. After that, it's mainly about playing off of max range E-poke. If you put him around 50 to 60% HP, you should have no issues winning all-ins as long as you've traded at least somewhat favorably. Fizz is not a problem for Aurora until at least one item, in which case it comes down to execution, but that's most assassin matchups outside of lane anyway. Some people will be shocked, but I will not put Fizz in almost unplayable. In fact, I will not even put him in opponent favorite. He will go high into the 50-50 category. I've played this matchup quite a lot, and I've never felt like, man, this matchup is so oppressive, I can't do anything. Aurora's kit naturally plays well into Fizz, comes down to your sequence and ideas on how to match his ability usage. Galio is a neutralizer. His whole purpose is to make it so you can't get a lead through the laning phase. That said though, Aurora does fairly good against him since her passive is a bit too much for Galio to handle. Pre-first back, you have a very big chance to kill him since he's fairly squishy until he actually buys any magic resist. General advice to follow is to anticipate his E usage when chasing him or when he steps up to you. Dodge it to the side or use your E to create distance on impact. Try to not use too many abilities on him while he has Aftershock or his W damage reduction. Keep his W magic resist shield down further by reapplying damage via autotext or Q2 extension. Galio is a very straightforward matchup and will go in the Aurora favorite tier. Even though he does do what he's supposed to, which is to be a hard to kill opponent, he surprisingly has a lot of windows to mess up. There are some champions in the game that struggle to deal with Heimerdinger, but that does not include Aurora. The reason is, level 1 you can actually kill his turrets since your auto attack outranges theirs. The way you do it is you auto attack, then you step back before it can actually hit you, repeat this a few times and the turret is gone. If Heimerdinger tries to defend them, greet him with an E. The other reason why Aurora does good is her E is actually a very good tool to get priority, apply poke to Heimer, and destroy his turrets throughout the whole laning phase. In general, Heimer is a pretty static champion. That said, you need to be careful when he attempts to dodge, since his passive gives him movement speed near his towers and it can be annoying. Every time you miss an E could mean you're giving away priority. You can even fish for lethal if you poke him down to around 50 to 60% HP the moment your abilities are off cooldown, and you have your ult of course. He will go into the Aurora favorite tier below Akali. Hwei, simply put, is a problem to go against. I've played this matchup at least 10 times now and I only end up losing it once. Even with that, I'll tell you it's not an easy one. The thing is, most Hweis don't use their champion to their fullest potential, but if you do meet a Hwei that has good movement, together with good ability usage and understanding of the matchup, boy is it difficult. Things to keep in mind when facing him are, try to hide behind minions so you don't give him a clear shot with his projectile ability, try to not let him hit the wave and you with array of damage as much as possible, look primarily for E plus Comet Poke, and when going for all-in, look to dodge his Fear ability, since if it hits you, not only will it most likely ruin the engage, he might also be able to turn it into a favorable situation for him. That said, he's also a very static champion, so landing poke on him is fairly easy. The hard part is actually playing around his abilities. Outside of lane, unless he goes more HP heavy, he's very prone to just getting one shot. Even though I've mostly had positive experience facing him, I do think this matchup is more difficult than it seems. It just depends how good the Hwei is. I'll put him in opponent favorite tier right above Annie. Jayce is a known counter to Aurora on top lane, And on mid lane, it's roughly the same, but it's a lot more playable due to their shorter lane. Your goal is to primarily play off of E and never let him Q onto you. He wins long extended trades, whereas he doesn't have much to do against poke in which you're hiding behind minions. Keep a close eye on what form he is in currently, and keep in mind that it has a 5-second cooldown to swap between them. Try to use E when he's in ranged form since he takes more damage due to not having the melee form resistances, and when he's in melee it's hard for him to CS and he's more inclined to look for an engage, use that in your favor. When he's out of vision, anticipate when he'll use a long range E plus Q and dodge accordingly. Even with the shorter lane, Jayce will go in opponent favorite right above Ekko. Karma is surprisingly a difficult opponent. She has a big HP pool due to her shields and W plus mantra healing. This matchup comes down to how many of her Qs can you bait out without getting hit by them. It's very important that you stay away from her and play from range to avoid giving her the mantra healing. Slowly whittling down her HP down via poke here and there is key, but honestly, if you find it difficult to push her out of lane early, don't bother, rather look for priority and applying pressure on the map. Your wave clear is better, so use that in your favor. Aurora is also mostly stronger than Karma outside of lane, of course depending on the team comps. Your E is a very good tool to space her, and you can certainly find kill angles if you poke her to a good enough amount, but just don't get baited by her mantra healing. One very big positive to this matchup is that it's almost impossible for Karma to fight lethal on you, since she doesn't really do that much damage and your passive ends up healing you a lot throughout the course of the lane. She will go in the skill matchup tier right above Akshan. Karthus is a matchup you'll end up facing eventually on mid lane. There's two things you need to be careful of. One, a level 1 all-in. It's better if you let the wave push into you in the beginning to avoid this inconvenience since it will come down to how many Qs you can dodge. 2, him bringing exhaust. Karthus can't really survive Aurora for more than 2 combos after level 4, so he'll have to have exhaust to be able to actually fight back. Outside of these two things, Aurora completely counters Karthus. She has a small hitbox and dashes around a lot, so hitting her with abilities is very difficult. She has an insane burst, and Karthus is a very static champion, so he's just a sitting duck. I honestly think this is the easiest matchup in the game for Aurora. Karthus as a champion just gets countered by her, not just in lane. The only real downside is his ult is guaranteed damage, but there's an item for that as well. Another actually quite nice to face champion, Kassadin. This is the only matchup in the game where Doran's blade is arguably better than Doran's ring. Do I advise going for it? Yeah, if you're proficient at applying pressure early, absolutely. You need to bully him correctly by not giving him a single minion without poke pre-level 6. Make him fall behind as much as possible, since after around level 11, he will run you down permanently, in which case you start focusing more on team fights. But by the time his level 11 comes, you need to have built such a big lead that you can comfortably close out the game relatively soonish. General lane tips are: try not to use too much magic damage on his magic resistant shield, manage your mana correctly, be careful for bone plating, don't give Doran's shield too much value if he has it, and after 6 try to wait for him to use Rift Walk before throwing any abilities. This matchup is slightly harder than Karthus due to the fact that you need to be constantly aggressive during lane, and the fact that you get hard outscaled after a certain point. A not so easy matchup though is Katarina. This is one of the most important matchups to use your early strength. Level 1 to 3 you need to bully her and make her miss as many minions as possible, simultaneously trimming down her HP pool. After level 3 look to primarily use E to poke. Having one extra point in it together with Scorch adds up fast. Never throw Q unless you can guarantee it hitting her, or at least the wave. The thing is, Katarinas are very likely to jump on you when it's on cooldown, but if you have pullbacks ready, you can actually fight back decently well. Mastering a max range E is also crucial. Katarina has telegraph ways to play the game, which you need to use in your favor. It comes down to experience and execution. I would like to call this an uncomfortable matchup, and I'll put it not higher than the low opponent favor tier. The thing is, pre-level 6, this matchup is, you could kinda call it semi-Aurora favorite. But the moment Katarina gets a bit more levels, and if Aurora blunders even one trade, Katarina can completely take over the current lane position and leverage it into a lead. So perfect execution from Aurora could mean that you're actually winning the lane, but it's hard not to make a mistake against a champion that has a blink on a short cooldown with a skill shot champion. I haven't noticed this, but the letter K actually has a lot of easiest matchups. Kayle is similar to Karthus and Kassadin in the sense that she can't really do much against Aurora during lane. In fact, this is a matchup that you can even consider going first strike on mid lane, since if the Kayle is good, she will lower the bleeding down to a minimum, so you need to be able to scale as much as possible as well. No matter the rune though, your goal is to make her miss as many minions as possible pre-level 6, and ideally finding a freeze that she's forced to drop XP to. In general, be careful of her immense movement speed boost from W, try to not get clipped by her Q area of impact when sitting near minions, and look to play on short sequence trades, especially after she gets her first item. She will go right above Kassadin. since I do think she's more dangerous if she gets a lead, and honestly her ult is a bigger threat to carry the game. Kennen is another matchup on mid that you rarely get to see, but I've actually faced him quite a lot, and together with that I have a lot of experience from top lane. On mid, this matchup is much more playable, since Kennen can't really freeze on you and you can play your own game with poke. Also, Kennen can't really deal with you if you hide behind minions and just perma-E him whenever it's up. You're extra rewarded here since having an HP lead could mean that he's forced to drop priority or even be unavailable to move for a potential player on the map. There are 2 points in the game when this matchup becomes really difficult. After level 6 when he can all-in you and 100 to 0 you with Ignite, and when he gets Rocket Belt, since that means that he can get a free dash onto you every time it's up. Your goal is to get a lead pre-level 6 and after try to anticipate when he looks to all-in you. Look to instantly run away preemptively and even be ready to flash instantly if he does so as well. Short trades and poke are beneficial to you, whereas Owens favor him. Kennen will go high in the skill matchup department. He has a small hitbox and his E movement speed can make you miss a lot of abilities if you're not careful, so it's certainly a volatile lane. AP Kog'Maw has existed for a long time, and while you don't meet him every day, you might do so sometime in the future. Main thing to keep in mind is you need to get good at dodging his E. Extra points if you get good at baiting it as well. Hiding behind minions from his Q is also pretty good. Once his E is on cooldown, you can look to walk at him and zone him off minions. If he doesn't go back, you can look for an extended trade with Q. The reason why I don't say E is because every time it's up, you should have already used it on him. He's a very static champion, and while he has decent range, if you play around his abilities correctly, he can space you and he's just a target dummy for your skill shots. He gets easily owned after level 6 with a little bit of pre-poke. Overall, not a difficult matchup, but he does deal a lot of damage. It's a guarantee you get at least 40 to 50% of your HP removed every time you go for an all-in. Keep that in your calculations and be careful of his passive. He's very similar to the other ADCs in the easy role, but I'll not put him next to them, rather on low Aurora favored, since it does take a bit more of getting the hang of to make the most use out of this matchup. Leblanc is a very controversial matchup for Aurora players. It's honestly up there as one of the most complained about matchups, and there's a good reason for it. She fights very unfairly through her W and has very good gank setup. If you give her any form of lead, she can run the whole lane and game with it. The truth is though, this matchup is about experience, accuracy, and reaction time. First, if you step into the minions, you need to recognize that's when she wants to use her W ability, since one of her weaknesses is that her W is her main trait mechanism, but it's also her only array of damage ability. Meaning that Aurora is better at securing priority, and priority gives a huge advantage to one side or the other, both in terms of having more minions to fight the enemy, but also if you can take recalls or not and roam around the map. Second, you need to anticipate her W usage. Sometimes she'll go for W into auto attack, which means that you can't line your abilities and you need to trade auto attacks back, or sometimes she'll use W to proc electrocute. You need to be ready to react with your own abilities. So it's kind of a mind game between you on how she wants to trade. She basically constantly skill checks you, and if you respond correctly, you'll actually be rewarded quite nicely. But if you respond wrong, there's gonna be very big consequences. Leblanc will go next to Annie in enemy favorite, mainly because she's the one who dictates the trading in the matchup, and because it's an extremely snowballing matchup that benefits her. A matchup that is way more straightforward though is Lissandra. Here there are 3 important things. First is making sure you play around how she throws Qs. Understand its range and know when you're in it, and also acknowledge that she wants to use the minions to extend it. Dodge to the side when it's appropriate or look to bait the range here and there. Of course, getting hit by 1 or 2 is not the end of the world, but the more you dodge, the easier the lane will look like. Second is always keeping in mind her E. If you ever step forward and she E's at you, are you getting set up for a gank? Unless you're sure it's not the case, it's best to be ready to step back. Or if she's looking to escape with it, make sure you take it in consideration when you O-in. Third and last is her ult. When she gets it, acknowledge that tracking the enemy jungler is the most important thing and is twice as mandatory than it was before, since if she has flash and you're in its range, you could just end up dying at any timer. Overall, you're stronger than her pre-6 and even after it, but it's a slightly annoying lane since it's all about jungle tracking. This matchup goes in low Aurora favorite right below Galio, since it's an easy matchup in a vacuum, but the strong gank setup makes it slightly awkward to play. When it comes to looks, the easiest way to explain it is you're basically her skill shot practice range. She completely outranges you, and this matchup all comes down to how good you are at dodging her abilities. Whatever you do, you need to not get hit by her Q. Now the good part here is that it's not the easiest ability to land, but it's very consequential if you do. However, on the other hand, her E completely destroys you, and your only counterplay is to anticipate and dodge accordingly to how she wants to throw it. It has a huge range and array of effect. I even advise you to drop CS here and there for the sake of not getting your HP evaporated by her E. You need to play with Comet and you need to fight back as much as possible. Use your W inwards to dodge abilities when flying at you and at the same time force a more extended trade if possible. Try to make it as chaotic as possible since discipline and short trades benefit her. It's your job to find openings in her defense and execute the skill shots and movement better than her. This is a close to unplayable lane. The last nail on the coffin though is the fact that even if you do win the movement battle, she could just decide, you know what, I'll just start NPC farming with ult from 3 screens away. So, definite, almost unplayable tier. Talking about NPC farming though, Malzahar is next in the line. This champion is notorious for just playing for the wave and not looking to interact with the opponent too much until level 6. It's your job to break that line of play and find openings to trade with him early. Move his passive with a hit before the trade, dodge inwards and outwards from his Q by anticipating its usage, hit his voidlings with your Q and look for longer extended trades since you win those. After level 6, be careful of jungle ganks since that's your biggest enemy, and at the same time, if you'll be fighting him, try to throw your abilities just before you get CC'd since that's how you min-max your damage. Malzahar will go into the Aurora favorite tier next to Lissandra. Mel is another champion that players complain about, but this time not only Aurora players. Her W ability is extremely anti-fun, but the thing is Aurora actually does pretty good into it. The reason is Mel can only reflect your Q ability, your E goes through it. So if you go with Comet and play primarily for E poke, you remove the biggest hurdle for the champion. Of course, now what's left is to get the hang of how to dodge her Qs and keeping her E in your mind when walking towards her. She's a fairly static and fragile champion, so once you put her around 50 to 60% HP, a full well executed all-in can let you lethal her. Mel does scale really nicely throughout the game, so try to build up a lead early and use it to take over the game. This matchup is a complete 50-50 one since it's heavily skill and execution dependent. It will go right above Brand. Irelia is by far the worst matchup on top lane, but that's not the case for mid. The shorter lane means no freezing, and an aggro champion like Irelia often gets punished by the jungler if she doesn't respect. Aurora has a lot more breathing room here since she can actually play more off of short trades, and with good execution, she can win the matchup quite consistently. Good execution includes not letting her hit you with any ease, keeping track of her stacks, paying attention to her dash trajectory, aka paying attention to low HP minions around you, not giving too much value on her W, utilizing pullbacks, and min-maxing your auto attacks while spacing hers as much as possible. And the most important thing is having the wave on your side whenever possible, together with having a big enough wave to push it out. Irelia will not even go in almost unplayable. She will go in opponent favored right next to Leblanc due to their similarities in terms of having an aggressive nature. Neeko is a matchup that I've played against twice, but I didn't play it a single time through my mid climb to Challenger. And honestly, I'm happy about it. My vague memory is of that of something very gruesome. Her Q is very hard for her to deal with, very similar to how Lux E works, so you'll be forced to drop a lot of minions. You want to play primarily off of E poke and keep a close eye to never get rooted by it. Now, when I think about it, Neeko is basically another version of Lux. I don't have much else to say due to not having faced it recently, so I don't want to give bad information, but judging off of my vague memory, I will put her high into the enemy favorite tier. Not the most unpleasant matchup, but certainly has its problems. But talking about a matchup that I've played quite a lot against is Orianna. It's highly dependent on what rune she chooses. If you're facing Storm Raider Surge Orianna, you honestly not feel a lot of pressure during the laning phase. Her damage is kinda annoying, but nothing you can't deal with. If however she goes for Ahri, then you'll feel quite a lot of pain since her Qs and more importantly her auto attacks start hurting a lot. Every time you get hit by an ability, it will feel very miserable. This is why I'll start with the most important advice in this matchup. Learn to track her ball and have a good estimate of its range. It's very important that you take it in consideration every time you step up for CSing. Try to never take damage from it for free, but of course sometimes you will be forced to. I advise you to play with combat and look to use your E every time it's up on her. Look to not go too deep when trading with her since her outdecks are no joke due to her passive. Rather look to only play for E poke, and eventually when she's around a certain HP threshold, you can look for an all-in. Overall, she's fairly static of a champion, so you shouldn't struggle too much applying pressure to her. She does however start being even a bigger problem later on into the lane since her Q cooldown becomes almost non-existent. Orianna will go above Ekko in the opponent favor category since it's a tricky matchup and it does require experience to play out a good laning phase against her. Next up is Qiyana. This is a matchup that is widely considered unpleasant to play, and I think that's completely correct. Qiyana is basically Katarina, but if she could stat check you starting from level 3. Even with a big HP lead, Qiyana can easily beat you if you're not careful. She doesn't even need to CS all that much, rather look for constant poke into all wins. And her lethal threshold is even quite high, unbearably high. The way you play this matchup from Aurora's side is you play as aggressive as possible first 2 levels with the goal of poking her down to a point where you can potentially fish for something later on, and making sure that the wave ends up pushing towards you. Afterwards, you put a point in E and look to only play off of max range E poke, unless of course she goes too deep and then you can throw some Qs. But remember that if she ever gets a full combo on you, you're not out damaging her. You need to get good at gouging her E range and at the same time dodging her Qs when she throws them from afar. The mindset for this lane is to survive. There's too much room for error, and Qiyana is not a very telegraphed champion since her W can be used in way too many ways. It's hard to space her since her intentions are not always clear either. She could turn a situation where she's running away into a kill for her. Unless of course she makes obvious mistakes that you can capitalize on, my advice is avoid doing too many risky plays early on. Rather look to play for mid game when you can potentially one-shot her since she's still at the end of the day just an assassin and is very squishy. She is the most difficult champion currently on the tier list, but it's not the most difficult matchup as a whole. Ryze on the other hand is a lot more telegraphed of a champion, but doesn't really matter since he's a walking stat stick. He does a lot of damage, scales good, and has insanely good wave clear. If you want to have a better time against him, you can go with an Arcane Comet setup and just beat him with your range, but I honestly advise not doing this if you're playing in High Master and above, at least not for mid lane. The reason is the wave is too short and Ryze doesn't really need to interact with you. He can shove waves and look to take recalls permanently, and he only needs to dodge one ability every wave and he'll slowly but surely get to his Exodia item, Catalyst. The moment he does that, it's no longer even worth trying to kill him since it'll take you 5 business days to do so. You're better off just trying to look to play for the map. That's why it's not really worth fighting a lane that doesn't need to fight you back. Hence Electrocute being a better investment than Arcane Comet. Of course, this little bit of information is only if the Ryze is so adequate at the game that he plays precisely and specifically for back timings. Otherwise, the general advice is avoid giving him E-stacks on you through minions, and in general don't stay near minions when initiating trades, always dodge his Qs, never make it easy for him to hit you with them, and pay attention to his mana flow ban since when it's not up, it's not actually worth for him to use abilities. Use that information in your favor. Ryze will go in the enemy favor tier right above Jayce. Next up is Swain. This is a champion that early game Aurora should have no issues beating. Swain's damage is very weak until he gets at least level 7ish since his Q is still pretty low damage and has decently big cooldown. Until that point, it's your job to look to make it as hard as possible for him to lane and even potentially find lead on him. Aurora has just enough range to make it difficult for Swain to CS. Of course, he does have one trick up his sleeve which he can use to fight back, his E. You need to get good at gouging its range and making sure you're not getting hit by it too much. Also be careful from using it through minions, since the thing is the impact part is actually a ref effect, meaning that he can extend his reach by hitting a minion max range. In general though, Swain struggles against Aurora since she's too mobile and it's hard for him to keep up his ult. His specialty is more melee-ish champions. Not only that, but Aurora has an easier time carrying games than Swain since she deals more concentrated damage and is better than him at fighting fights and picks. So oftentimes just having a small lead in the laning phase is enough to transition it into a win. Swain will go below Akshan in the skill matchup department, since I do think there's a learning curve to this matchup and Swain can punish you if you're not careful. Sylas is a difficult matchup for a lot of champions in the game, including Aurora. He's a natural counter since he has easy ways to get close to you, deals a lot of damage, works well with HP plus AP items, and has everyone's ult including Aurora. And we all know that her ult is the strongest part about the champion. That said, he's actually not that hard to beat early on. It does take a few things to get good at though. Playing behind minions as much as possible and never giving him a knee on you. Paying attention to his Q and never getting hit by his Q2 part. Position correctly for pullbacks, min-maxing your auto attack damage on him, and spacing him. After a certain point, especially Rocket Belt, the matchup is no longer winnable since he just stat checks you. But that's fine since you're arguably stronger than him in teamfights, you just have to find your place and carry through that. Sylas will go right above Anivia in enemy favored. Next up is the champion I personally ban every single game, Xin'Zhao. A lot of people have asked me, bro, why do you ban her? She's not even that difficult. To that I say, yeah, she's not that difficult, but she is pretty hard to deal with. A good Xin'Zhao will space you hard and will look to not do anything too rash until she gets a few levels. Her E completely counters Aurora since she negates any chance to fight back in a trade. Yes, it has a decently big cooldown and you should look to use it in your favor if you end up facing her, but in general, I just don't like the whole dynamic of the lane together with the fact that after a certain point, she just one-shots you. The funny part is you can one-shot her back as well if you find a good angle, but she'll probably lethal you in the process as well. That's because her ult is a point click plus 1 kill added to your score ability. It's a rough thing to play around throughout the course of a game. General tips include playing aggressive as possible early levels, constantly trying to bait and play around her E ability, looking to poke her down to an HP threshold after which you can ON, utilizing the fact that she's fairly static via mainly playing off of E poke, and prioritize playing the map over the 1v1, since if she's a good player, she will just look to neutralize the lane. I would put her above Lux in the almost unplayable tier. And as you can see, I don't actually consider her the most difficult matchup. That's why when people ask me who to ban, I always tell them ban whatever you don't like facing, since there's no matchup on mid lane you can't overcome. Taliyah is another champion I face quite often. The most important thing to take in consideration when facing her is how to play around her Q ability. Level 1 you can't fight it, she will get priority if she wants to. However, you can make it so that's all she gets. You can level up E to poke her down, simultaneously not letting her hit you with any of the Qs. It's very important. The goal of the whole lane is to repeat that as much as possible. Make it uncomfortable for her to lane by barely sitting outside of her Q range, and if she ever uses ability on the wave, it's your time to step up and poke her down. Aim at her HP pool where she aims at the minions. Here you might be thinking, but what if she recalls? She could, but that's why your goal is to make it so she can recall on a good wave. At one point her HP will be at a threshold where you can hold the wave and even fight her in the wave. Which is another very important thing. You need to manage the wave according to the situation correctly. Using your E to negate her W is an important mechanic to master, and eventually winning her after level 6 due to her quite static nature is a game plan to follow. I used to think Taliyah was on par with Orianna, but not so much nowadays. Since playing the matchup more, I realized that she can't really fight back against Arcane Comet Aurora that well. For that reason, she'll go high into the skill matchup category. The last prominent ADC on mid lane, Tristana. She's not always in the meta, but when she is, she can be a little bit annoying. The most important thing to realize in this matchup is that she's looking for long trades and ONs. Knowing her W range and making sure that the wave is more towards your side is key, since you need to be able to disengage to safety if you want to trade efficiently. Of course, make sure that if she jumps on your side while you have minions, you're landing auto-attacks back, since just abilities won't cut it. Yeah, she's scary if it's just a purely auto-attack battle, but if it's on your side, it's actually favoring you. With that said, early on Aurora should have no issues beating her, since she struggles to deal with champions she can't just jump on and win automatically, together with the fact that Aurora is pretty strong early if she lands a lot of abilities. Tristana will go right above Galio in Aurora favor. Twisted Fate is a matchup that you shouldn't really struggle against. I faced some pretty good players on this champion, and if they have good movement they can make the matchup somewhat contested, but if you both play good, TF should have no ways of beating you. That said, be careful since he does have a very easy way to set up ganks via his yellow card, but as long as you're ready to react with your W or E to create distance, ganking you is still very difficult. Try to not sit around minions if there's a chance for him to use red card. Avoid giving him his E aka stack deck proc, keep close attention to when he uses Q to avoid getting hit by it randomly, and after level 6 be careful since his ult reveals you in stealth. This is kinda problematic if you're looking to engage in a fight and the enemies end up seeing you, since it ruins the element of surprise. TF will go above Kog'Maw in Aurora favor. Veigar is another matchup that I've heard quite a lot of players struggle against, but the truth is there's no reason for that to be the case. Veigar has an extremely weak early and is quite skillshot orientated. Aurora can use that in her favor quite easily. Now you're required to get good at dodging his Qs and at the same time find opportunities to step up and poke him down with E, but it's a skill set you need to learn in general. He does outscale you, and after he gets a little bit of HP in his build, he does become somewhat problematic since finding lethal on him becomes kind of difficult, but he can't ever really force any kills onto you either unless you mess up. There's actually a matchup in the game that plays literally the same way. That's Mundo on top lane. Dodging his skill shots, playing aggressive early, and accepting that after a certain point unless you have a lead you won't be able to kill him are basically applicable to both. Also, make sure you play this matchup with Comet and mainly off of your E poke. Use your W to dodge abilities even inside the cage, use your ult portal to not get hit by the cage edges, and always think where and how he's looking to use his Q ability. With that, I'll put Veigar right below Ahri as I think he's very similar to her on how you play the lane. Next up is Vel'Koz, and this champion you don't really meet that often, if at all, but when you do, you realize, wait, he outranges me and this is kinda awkward to play. He has very unique skill shots that you need to play around, and his Q is something you need to constantly be aware of and switch up your dodging pattern. His E is something you always think about when getting close to him, since it's his only line of defense from a big trade or all-win. It's also his main way to look for a kill on someone, so it's very high priority that you dodge it. Generally speaking, the game plan is to play with Comet, a few points into E, play mainly from max range, and to survive until level 7ish, and then look to do poke into constant all-wins, since at that point your damage starts hurting. Vel'Koz is quite static, so if you make the wave towards your side and force him to step up, he should be easy prey. And of course, if he makes any blunders earlier than that, you should punish. That said, that's simply the game plan. Realistically, dodging his abilities takes a lot more effort, and his capability to spam them is quite oppressive. Also, his big range makes it so he can secure priority quite easily, and approaching him can be dangerous. He will go high into the skill matchup tier since I do think it's purely about skill shot accuracy and champion movement. Outside of lane, Vel'Koz is easy to catch and just one shot. Vex is kinda similar to Vel'Koz on skill shot importance, but even more dangerous. She's a more prominent and safe counter to Aurora due to her being very big range and the fact that she can disengage an all-in semi-easily. There are a few important details. Her Q is very big range, so get used to dodging mainly through the sides by anticipating it first. Whenever trading, think about her W shield. Try to not get hit by her E, though this ability is very hard to dodge, so generally what I like to do is buffer any of my abilities on it so I have as less downtime as possible in terms of DPS. And in general, keep your HP high. Dodging and having a stable HP to play the lane is more important than flipping constant poke on her, since she has the high ground in this lane. She will go right above Orianna since I do think she's very similar to her but slightly more impressive. And now we'll talk about one of the most difficult matchups on mid and top lane for Aurora, Viktor. Starting from level 1, he will win any trait you directly take. Reason is he will play Ahri, have bone plating, and his Q is not very interactive. It lets him win any short trait against basically any champion. His only weakness is the fact that he doesn't have Array of Effect, so you can use this to secure priority by hitting him and minions with your Q, and I do advise doing it. Once level 1 is over, now is the time to accept that you won't have priority and slowly struggle until your next recall. Goal until then is to keep HP as high as possible, maintain a good wave state, aka be ready to respond to something happening in the map if it looks good for you, and CS as good as possible. It will be very uncomfortable getting hit by lasers every couple of seconds, but that's the matchup. After you get your first back and have at least 3 points into E, you can actually fight back. Your poke actually starts mattering, and now the goal is to hit max range E's in which Viktor can't retaliate easily. Try to wait for him to CS and ideally look to hit the wave as well, since now fighting for priority is an option. The game plan has shifted to trying to put him in an HP threshold where we can actually all-in and use the fact that he's very static in our favor to get flashes, priority, and potentially lethal. I have to warn you though, this matchup is very snowbally and you do get windows to do things as long as you have good movement and hitting skill shots, but it's extremely volatile. I do advise going for these plays if you see them, just make sure they're actually good for you. Viktor will go above everyone else in almost unplayable tier. The almost undodgeable lasers, very strong laning phase, and constant pressure on you to look for something in return makes this matchup the worst one so far. Is it the worst one altogether? Watch until the end to find out. Viktor is actually the champion I recommend to people to learn mid lane on during my coaching sessions. He's the pinnacle of any control mage and he teaches you very important concepts, including how to take a game in your own hands. If you're interested in having a session with me, check out my site. Moving on, Vladimir is interestingly an easier matchup top lane than mid. The reason is the shorter lane allows him to get easier access to minions due to freezing being harder to pull off. That doesn't change your approach to the matchup though. You need to be very aggressive early by paying attention to his Q bar below his HP. Never give him an empowered Q since one can easily sway the matchup towards him. Look to max range Q since Aurora's range is barely able to space him. Try to be contesting every minion when you have abilities up, but at the same time find the right approach since you're limited in terms of mana, meaning if you miss a tad too many abilities, you run out of juice before you can get a significant advantage. On average, you're stronger than him until around 2 items as long as you keep a lead, but it's strictly execution orientated due to the fact that Vladimir is a higher scaling champion and he has some very strong power spikes like level 9 and his first item. Oblivion Orb also helps out to shut him down, but if someone else can buy it, it's generally better. Vladimir will go right below Brand, as I think it's a battle of spacing and movement. When it comes to Xerath, I've heard a lot of people saying something along the lines of, this champion counters Aurora because she can't deal with his long range, and I completely disagree with that. If you're struggling in this matchup, it's probably because of 1 to 3 reasons. You're not good at dodging his abilities and playing around them in general, you're not playing aggressive enough early game to force him to make mistakes, or you're not confident in the lethal angles of Aurora, so you're not willing to pull the trigger. To fix these, you need to understand how his Q works and get confident at dodging it, and at the same time never letting him hit you and the wave. Play outside of it so he has to make a choice. When you get close to him, anticipate him opening with W, since it's his easiest ability to land, which also enables his other abilities, and make sure you dodge his E, either with W or movement. Make sure you're looking for WE poke from time to time as well. Combat is your best friend to set up his HP down to a lethal percentage, and the last puzzle piece is to make the wave push towards you so he's forced to step up. Xerath will go in the easy role next to Ezreal. He's weak early, full of skill shots, and fairly static. Everything that Aurora wants. but you do have to be proactive in order to capitalize on it. Recently, Xin'Zhao became a flex pick mid laner, and it's an interesting one, but nothing Aurora needs to worry about, especially on this lane. It's so short that it benefits her and the way she wants to play it. Make sure you utilize pullbacks every time he goes on you, never let him jump on you for free, dodge random W attempts from him, look to not let him free hit the wave since he'll just sustain back the poke you've already inflicted on him, and keep either E or W to space him if he ever gets an angle on you, and make sure that you use E as a buffering capability. You mostly stat check him pretty easily, but don't just fist fight him, utilize your distance advantage. He will go into Aurora favorite below Akali, as the matchup plays similar to her but easier to pull off. A very signature matchup, Yasuo. This one is completely unplayable on top lane, but on mid that's not the case at all. A very important thing to do level 1 is let the wave push towards you. Do not take priority, otherwise level 2 you get completely destroyed in an all-in since you'll be forced to step up. The moment you've solidified the slow push towards you, you can honestly start taking trades by allowing him to dash to you. Make sure you remove his shield before a fight, ideally not get hit by a tornado, use your E for damage on him, and also CS in cannon creeps if you think he'll use wind wall, use your own ult to negate his ult, and in general space him while landing as many auto attacks as possible. And last but not least, use pullbacks to min-max your damage. Aurora does decently well against him throughout the early lane, since her damage output is pretty good, and together with the inability of Yasuo to freeze the wave, make this potentially winnable. Yasuo will go into enemy favorite right below Irelia since they're basically the same champion in regards to this matchup. Next up is the easier to deal with brother, Yone. Aurora does really good into him since he is extremely weak until he gets his first item. Make sure you play for priority early and be very aggressive. Look to poke him every time he tries to get a minion. Anticipate his W usage and try to not proc Electro or use Q2 on his shield. Ideally, you can even try to space its range and not take damage from it as a whole. You don't want to extend traits against him too much, but if you have fancy feet and dodge some of his Qs, you should still be able to win even a more extended altercation. After level 6, look to always be ready to dodge on the side either with W or movement in case he uses ult. It's very telegraphed and the key is to know that it's coming. Yone will go into the Aurora favorite tier right above Xin'Zhao. Next up, it's another notorious matchup, Zed. Level 1 and 2, it's extremely important that you play aggressive. Look to step up towards him and be confident that you can dodge his Q either by stepping outside of its range or to the side. Getting hit by it is not the end of the world, but try to not eat too many of them in a row. Try to build up an HP or CS lead at the very beginning. After level 3, you can no longer step up without your main goal being to bait out his W. His W's trading pattern is very difficult for Aurora to deal with, so unless it's on cooldown or you completely outplay the shurikens that come with it, you will not come out on top. Also make sure you primarily start playing with max range E's. An extra point into it goes a long way. Make sure you switch up your dodging strategies when it comes to his Qs, and if you're ever about to get hit by one, sitting behind a minion lowers its damage significantly. Your only real timers to step up and be aggressive are when his W is on cooldown. After 6, unless you have a lead, play mainly for priority and not interacting with him since he will play aggressive and trading ults is not beneficial to you due to you having a bigger cooldown in it, but also your ult is more impactful for objectives and skirmishes. Of course, if he messed up and you can find a kill angle with it, go for it. Sid will go in almost unplayable right above Qiyana. He's a difficult matchup that excels at 1v1ing, which Aurora does struggle into. Another artillery mage, Ziggs. Similar to most of the other ones, you should play with Comet and look to put at least 3 points into E. Do not let him hit both you and the wave with Q, look to mainly play off of your max range E, look to skill check his Q accuracy, and in general make him hard to exist in lane. Ziggs' early is not very strong, but he does deal a lot of damage. Something that a lot of people neglect is his passive damage. Make sure you're keeping track of it and not letting him hit you for free when it's up. The matchup fully revolves around how many abilities you can dodge and can you force him to step up when he's low HP. He wants disciplined laning, whereas you want chaotic but precise aggression. Ziggs will go right above Veigar in Aurora favorite. He deals a lot of damage and certainly can pose a threat to Aurora, but he's just slightly too skillshot reliant to put him higher. Zilean is the ultimate early aggression check. Champions need to be able to put him behind in the beginning if they want to have an easier time later on. Luckily for us, Aurora does that pretty nicely. Be as aggressive as possible first couple of levels. Step up, skill check him with Qs, and try to use your electrocute on cooldown. This is one of the matchups where attempting to freeze by letting the opponent wave push towards you is kinda mandatory. This is because it's your job to put him as behind as possible both in terms of XP and gold. Even if the enemy jungler comes and breaks the freeze, you've at least forced him to invest time in bailing him out. This lane is also a free scaling ground for Aurora, so cutdown is on the menu. The only things that you need to get good at here is dodging his bombs and in general getting good at forcing him to use them on you. If you ever get hit by one of them, you can even consider letting them hit the wave if it's a good time to let the wave push towards you. Zilean will go right above Kassadin in the easy tier, since I do think he's harder to punish than him. Also, one thing I want to point out here is that Aurora generally does nicely into Zilean, since you can force his ult quite easily with your regular abilities later on. Yet another unpleasant matchup in the Aurora community, Zoe. I will have to completely agree with this one. It's quite the unfun experience. It's heavily dependent on skill shots from both sides. Level 1, anticipate that Zoe might start Q and look to charge it on you. Start fighting for priority, and every time Zoe starts charging Q, either make sure you can dodge it by hiding behind minions, or be ready to step up and throw a Q back at her. Try to never eat damage for free. If she fights for priority, just accept it and let the wave push back towards you. I mean, of course, if she's winning it. Level 1 you are stronger, but level 2 and 3 you're weaker. You need all abilities plus 1 extra point into E to have a good chance at out-trading her, aka level 4. Which leads me to a very important advice. Treat her like a ranged assassin, mainly look for max range E poke. Use your W to reposition from her Q, don't throw Qs too blindly, make sure that when she's trying to CS, if things go bad, just go back. As long as you don't die and give her a big advantage, you can play it out better next time. This lane is a huge skill check. And the most important tip I can give you here is to use your ult to negate her sleep. Most Zoe players don't even know that's a thing, and it can single-handedly win you trades and even the whole lane. Zoe will go at the highest point of enemy favored, even above Sylas. The reason why I won't put her in almost unplayable is because she's a skill shot champion, and you can distinguish that she does have pretty obvious counterplay, which is just play better. Last, but certainly not least, Zyra. Some people might question, why did I put her in the tier list? She's barely ever played in mid lane. Well, the reason is I did face one really long ago, was probably like a year at this point, and take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt, but I'll never forget how miserable it was to face the champion. She completely outranges you, can easily negate your engage, and can see us via her plans, so landing poke on her is not even easy. Until around level 7 when you start dealing good damage, it's basically just a survive lane. Level 1 is the only time when you're arguably stronger than her, but that quickly disappears since the moment she gets all 3 basic abilities, she starts fighting back very significantly. The best advice I can give is really to just don't do all that much until you start out-winning her, since trying to fight through her very annoying damage will only make things worse. Prioritize your HP and only go for poke if she's making obvious blunders. I'm really torn, get it? Apart where to put Zyra. Honestly, in my opinion, she deserves a spot in low almost unplayable, but because I've only faced her once and my experience of playing against her is limited, she will go in low enemy favored. Mind you, I actually destroyed her in that game I played. I went something like 4-0 in lane, but I still felt like this matchup is not easy. I just beat her because she disrespected my all-win potential. So I'm praising this champion because I fear her strength, not because I lost to her. Wait, now when editing the video, I saw that I missed 2 champions, the Fury and Talon. Let's rank them as well. The Fury is an uncomfortable match for Aurora. Early levels, it's not that hard, you need to get good at dodging her Qs and at the same time finding poke via your E ability. This is probably the only assassin where Comet makes a lot of sense. Look to use her dogs as pullbacks when trading if possible, anticipate her using E to gap close to you, and keep her W invisibility in mind when picking up a fight. After 6 is when this matchup becomes really difficult since her ult is very low CD and makes her basically a homing missile against you. Look to respect her even more and be ready to disengage at all times. Playing from range, dodging, and spacing her can win you the matchup, but due to the difficulty and how easy it is to execute on the Fury side, I'll be putting her in almost unplayable right below Qiyana, as I do think she's similar to her but slightly not as oppressive early on. Later on, outside of lane though, the Fury does become harder to deal with. Talon on the other hand is another assassin who isn't that difficult to deal with. He has a very straightforward kit which screams dodge my W and don't let me get 3 stacks, otherwise you're getting all in. Look to push the wave in early and bully him as much as possible, but occasionally running in and out to bait out and dodge his W is key. Avoid giving him melee Qs if possible since they deal more damage, and position in a way to use pullbacks. He isn't that oppressive in lane, but the moment he gets level 6 he could start looking for constant all-wins, so look to play from your range with E. I'll put him right below Fizz as I think he's similar to him, but not as oppressive. And with that, there's no more champions remaining. So how did I do? I know everything is subjective at the end of the day, but what do you think? Is the tier list similar to your thoughts about matchups or not? I'll be happy to read your comments below. I sincerely hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you like the video, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Check out all the socials, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video.